The 2000s to mid-2010s were an interesting time for young students and the academic world. I'm sure many of you who were in school at the time remember teachers drilling into you the importance of these tests you had to take every year. Not the SAT or ACT you take in high school, but one that determines the future of your entire school. Crazy, I know. Imagine being told in the first grade that how well you do on a test can impact whether your school keeps its funding or if your teacher still has a job. That is thanks to the 2001 Act, No Child Left Behind, or NCLB for short. You see, for many years, underperforming students were essentially ignored by the education system, especially those from poor or minority backgrounds. So, in January of 2001, Ohio Representative John Boehner introduced the NCLB bill. He wanted to improve the quality of education across the country and hold schools responsible for low marks, forcing them to pay attention to those who fall behind rather than sweeping them under the rug. Lawmakers wanted to give all students a fair chance to succeed and bridge achievement gaps between students of different backgrounds. This bill's method of achieving its goal was by mandating testing nationwide to measure educational progress and understanding, pushing schools to better teach students. The bill had bipartisan support, which just means that it had support from members of both political parties, especially the Bush administration. And CLB quickly became a key part of George W. Bush's education agenda at the time, believing that identifying schools that weren't up to standard and forcing them to improve would raise the overall education level. How good it sounded on paper and the popular support in Congress, it passed and was signed into law in January of the following year. On paper, it sounded great on paper. But in reality, it was disastrous. To start, the mandated testing only covered English and mathematics. This naturally led teachers to focus more on those tested subjects and pull class time away from other topics like science, art, music, and history. These are all incredibly important classes that nurtures a student's creativity, critical thinking, and help them grow into well-rounded adults. So when schools pulled away from those topics, students were left with a less enriching education. Many criticized the act because it forced schools to teach to the test rather than ensuring students actually understood the material. Many students and teachers felt this made class less engaging and more stressful. But the biggest problem? Funding. When the act was put in place, high standards were set without sending schools the funding or aid needed to meet them. So naturally, poorer schools struggled and failed to meet the mark. The punishment? More funding cuts. Which is crazy to me. That's like asking someone to bake a cake without sugar, and when it comes out bitter, taking away the flour, and then expecting them to do a better job the second time around. These schools were set up to fail. Losing funding meant layoffs, bigger class sizes, fewer textbooks, and cuts to extracurricular programs. This made it even harder for students that were already struggling to succeed. It became a cycle. Less funding led to poorer performance, which led to more punishment and even less funding until the school had no choice but to shut down. In the end, the kids who were supposed to benefit the most from No Child Left Behind often end up falling even further behind. This impacted low-income schools disproportionately compared to their more well-off counterparts. This led to the very students the bill was meant to be helping being worse off than before. No Child Left Behind aimed to shrink the achievement gap between students of different backgrounds, but instead made it even worse. And the well-off schools? How were they impacted? That's the kicker, because even schools with plenty of funding saw little to no improvement with math or English scores.